that we are now. I would remind everybody that we are now recording this meeting and it's being live streamed on YouTube for public viewing. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, committee members are in each of their respective homes and places of work for the duration of this recording. I would like to welcome all guests and viewers. Thank you for those of you who have joined us today, and to the members of the public watching our live stream or later the recording of this meeting. As we typically do, I would like to acknowledge that on behalf of the committee, we are on the traditional land, which we are virtually gathered, which is Treaty 6 territory. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as home. With that in mind, we have been called to order. I would seek approval of the agenda. Would somebody like to move adoption of the agenda? Sam?
Yeah, I can make that motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Okay, using the raise hands function, all those in favor? Okay, we have adoption of the agenda. Thank you. So I would now turn it over to Mr. Jankowski to take us away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We've got two items on the agenda today, both of which I believe will be fairly brief. The first item is just an update on our processes that we're going through to continue to build up the organization. The many members of the committee will have gotten familiar with the slide that you see in front of you today. Today, we've just chosen to color code some of the boxes that are shown in here, just to give you an idea or give you a bit of an update as to where we are with the key recruitments that we're going through. Maybe I'll start at the left-hand side of the box. We are now in the second round of the recruitment for the manager of financial planning, reporting, and accounting, or manager of finance under Lori Shea Smith. When I say we're going through the second round, I mean the second iteration of that. We had gone through one sequence or one recruitment process, and we were unable to negotiate a final agreement with our selected candidate, and we went back out to market, and we're now going through the process of negotiating a suitable employment agreement with our selected candidate, and looking forward to getting that person on board in the very near future. Moving to the Director of Corporate Services, we are similarly engaged in our recruitment of that position. We've gone through the first round of interviews with a number of candidates, and tomorrow we'll be moving to the second round of interviews with 3 selected candidates that have gotten this far in the process, and I'm very hopeful that soon we will have a senior leadership team member that will be responsible primarily for the areas of human resources, data analytics, as well as, human resources and labor relations, as well as IT and data analytics. We've grouped those functions under the Director of Corporate Services, and although in the fullness of time, those two areas, those two groupings may evolve into being dedicated strategic resources. At this point in time, we're recruiting for one leader to oversee those groupings of functions. The next, the box that I will ring in black, you can see that we have moved ahead with the Manager of Communications position under Brian Bechtel. As I mentioned at the outset of the meeting, Sean Platt has been retained as our digital media advisor, and Sean is the one coordinating today's meeting. We are going through the recruitment process now. We're advertising for the Manager of Communications under Brian. And last but not least, at the left-hand side, or sorry, right-hand side of the slide, I have spoken to this position of Chief Operating Officer a number of times now with the board. We did go through a full round of recruitment. I will call it sort of passive recruitment, where we did our normal advertising, and we evaluated the submissions of interest that had come in from a number of candidates. We went through a round of interviews, and at the end of the day, what I have decided is that we need to be a little more aggressive in our recruitment process. We're now going through a request for proposals that's been issued to 4 selected firms that have a lot of experience in recruiting for transit operations roles across Canada. And we're awaiting those proposals to come in order to initiate a much more aggressive pursuit of suitable candidates from across the country. So that's where we sit with the next actions intending to build up our senior leadership team and moving into the next level of supervisor or next level of management as well. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to the HR function update.
Members of the committee, are there any questions of our CEO? Not seeing any. Mr. Jankowski, I would turn it back to you.
Thank you. So if we can flip the slide, the next motion is just to accept the suggested motion is to accept the information.
I would so entertain a notice or a motion to that effect.
Happy to move that the HR and Compensation Committee accept as information the material and discussion as presented during the HR function update.
Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, I would then call the question. All those, please use the raise hand function. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Jankowski, on to the policy update.
Thank you very much. So just remind committee of the process that has been prescribed in both the governance bylaw and in the board approved authority matrix. There has been the practice, or the board enshrined the practice of the commission adopting a number of policies and what should be followed in terms of adopting policies. With regards to HR policies, it's been prescribed in the authority matrix that the responsibility for development of the recommended policies rests with the senior administration, but the approval role for HR related policies for the organization rests with the board. And in doing so, it's also prescribed that this committee, the Human Resources and Compensation Committee, is the approver of all of the policy submissions from staff to the board with respect to HR issues. What we have been working on over the last number of months is the development of the first sort of suite of policies that we believe to be the most urgent policies for the board to consider and for the organization to adopt and put in place. They essentially fall into 2 categories. The first category being the policies that are responsive to and position the organization in a way that meets legal obligations as prescribed by legislation and regulation of senior levels of government. And as such, what we have brought forward is our 4 policies for the committee's consideration in that category: the Occupational Health and Safety Organizational Policy, the Occupational Health and Safety General Responsibility Policy, which prescribes responsibilities to the various levels or various positions within the organization. We have also brought forward a COVID policy that similarly responds to the current suite of conditions, and we have brought that forward after working with legal counsel and with Sixth Sense on developing that policy. And we're also bringing forward an employee accommodation policy that is referenced in the COVID policy in particular. Those 4 policies respond to, as I said, external demands for organizations such as ours to have in place these policies to deal with our responsibilities as a knowledgeable and responsible employer of choice in the Edmonton area. And the one additional point that I would make is that we have developed these policies as well as the next category of policies that I will speak to in a couple of minutes. We've developed all 7 of these policies in consultation with and in reflection of an environmental scan that Sixth Sense Human Resources did, looking at similar policies that are in place across our 8 member municipalities, as well as other municipalities in Alberta, similar sized municipal organizations, as well as looking at similar organizations such as commissions or special purpose bodies in the capital region. So we've carried out that environmental scan. We've taken what we consider to be the best management practices, or those practices that are most applicable to the operations that this organization will be responsible for. We've collated them and put them forward in the 4 policy documents that I've referenced, and they are here for the committee's consideration and hopefully approval to move forward. There is some urgency with regards to these policies. We have been working under the, I guess, in general conformance with the legislation and the regulations that are prescribed and that are reflected in these policies. But as we're now growing in terms of our staff complement, it is a time at which these policies become a little more critical for the organization to adopt, and so they are being brought forward. Just to speak to the last 3 policies that are on the screen, we have also started to look at some of the benefit related policies, HR policies that need to be put in place for our organization. And similarly, as I said, we've also carried out an environmental scan to really identify where we believe the commission should be positioned in relation to some of these benefit components of an overall compensation package to reflect some of the responsibilities that an organization such as ours has in terms of ensuring that our employees are adequately prepared to meet with some of the challenges associated with working diligently towards some of our objectives, and that those things are reflected in the vacation policy, in the statutory and general holidays policy, as well as our sick leave policy. As I said, we've looked at the similar policies that are in place across our 8 member municipalities, as well as some of the other organizations in the capital region. And where we've positioned ourselves in terms of these recommendations are not necessarily at the highest level bar in relation to each one of these areas, but what I believe we've done is we've positioned ourselves fairly, we've positioned ourselves competitively, recognizing that these 3 areas are also areas that potential employees look at when they're considering whether they should be coming and whether they're interested in pursuing a career or at least the next step in their career within the construct of the Edmonton Metropolitan Transit Services Commission. So we've brought those forward as well. They are also included in your package, and they are being submitted for your consideration for recommendation to the board for approval. Just before I pause, I also wanted to indicate, and on the next slide, there are 2 additional documents that are listed, and they're included in your package. Complementary to the COVID policy, which really is a high-level policy and reflective of governmental direction, we've also developed a specific corresponding COVID protocol that really gets at the kind of the boots on the ground nuts and bolts as to how we apply many of the COVID policy requirements and how does that become operationalized within our specific workplaces. And we've also prepared and put in place now a confidentiality agreement that all new employees are coming forward and that are hired by the organization. They all sign the confidentiality agreement. While not specifically requiring the board's approval, I have also included these documents for this committee's knowledge and consideration. We're not seeking any action on the part of the committee with respect to these, but for completeness, I thought it would be worthwhile to include these in your package. So I will pause there. It wasn't my intent to go through each one of the policy documents in detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know that we've got Brittany Bryce here from Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense has done tremendous work in terms of putting together the policies and trying to cobble together a lot of the information that we've collected from many of the other agencies that I referenced. We do recognize that there is a little bit of inconsistency perhaps in some of the language and some of the style that might be employed across the policy documents that are brought forward. And in the future, we will endeavor to create a more comprehensive and uniform style in terms of making sure that all the policies are written in a particular prescribed way. We have not yet had the opportunity to develop sort of a policy development style guide, and so we haven't put that in place yet for the broad suite of policies that the board is going to be seeing in the future and that are going to become instrumental pieces of how we oversee the administration of the organization. But we feel it's urgent, it's necessary for us to bring forward these policies now for the board's consideration and hopefully approval. So I will pause there and answer any questions. We also have Kathleen Elhatton Smith, I believe, from Shores Jardine, although I don't see her on the screen. I know Kathleen was here a little bit earlier, if there are any legal questions.
I would open to the floor for any questions from Councillor Knack or Councillor Muckhoff-Swain relative to these draft policies that are before us today. Any observations or questions from either one of you gentlemen? I'm not seeing anything.
Oh,
in
sorry,
that
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, you were just flashing around on my screen. I missed this.
No problem. And not a question, just one minor, everything looks great. One minor flag. All of the policies, really appreciate the language. I think was in everything except one line was gender neutral. And I just want to flag that one line, which is on the staff accommodation policy in point 2 under individual accommodation. That's the only spot where we still use the language his or her. In every other part we use there or an employee. So if we can just adjust that when it comes to the board. But I appreciate the fact that that was probably a copy and paste from somewhere else. So
thank you. Yes, we'll certainly address that.
Just a little bit of background. I read through the draft policies yesterday and did offer some comments to Mr. Jankowski for future edification relative to drafting of the policies to make sure they're consistent and that they follow a standard format. So I guess the only question that I had was the fact that these will ultimately come back to the board. Once they are approved by the board at our next board meeting, they will be subject to review going forward. Is that not correct, Mr. Jankowski?
That's correct. And so subsequent to our discussion yesterday, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for that edification and that suggestion, we will, where possible, seek to just clarify from a stylistic perspective these policies prior to bringing them forward to the board. The content, the technical content will not change, but if we can clean up some of the style prior to next week, I think it's safe for the board to recommend them in their current format, recognizing that there will be no substantial changes to content. Where we can't do that, our intent, as with all other policies, is that we will continuously be looking at these and refreshing these on a periodic basis, and we will be updating them as required for content and certainly for more consistent style across the board as well. So when you see these next week, you might see a slightly different stylistic presentation of these, but I can assure you that the content will be essentially the same content as you see today, should the committee choose to recommend them as they are.
Yeah, and I personally was comfortable with the content. Some of the style could be updated to maintain a consistent style going forward, as you've mentioned. So I think with that proviso in mind, I'm comfortable with the draft policies that they've been presented to the committee. Any other comments, Councillor Muckhoff-Swain or Councillor Knack? Okay. Well, with that in mind, I would entertain a motion as presented on the screen. If we can go back to that motion. There we go. Would somebody like to put that motion on the floor?
Yeah,
Councillor Muckhoff Swain. Okay,
I can move that the HR and Compensation Committee recommend the 7 draft human resource policies to the board for approval.
any comment or discussion on the motion?
Just only the fact that, you know, there were some minor comments made and you know, recognizing that you've got that. So you'll work through that. We don't need to update the motion. So just to flag that.
Okay, with that in mind, then I would close discussion and call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, carried unanimously. So, Mr. Jankowski, you've got approval on those motions. So good work, and thanks to the team for all the work that they put in to get them to this stage. This is a work in progress, and I know it's not easy, but I would like to thank you personally for all the effort that your team has put into it. So it's definitely good work. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we don't have an in-camera session today. So with that in mind, all of our items of business have been dispensed with. Is that correct, Mr. Jankowski?
That is correct, sir. We have we don't have any additional business, and I too just would like to thank Brittany Bryce and Karen Marner for all of the hard work involved in dealing with the senior leadership team in terms of putting together the policies for your consideration.
Well, thank you very much. If there are no other orders of business before the committee today, I guess I would adjourn the meeting effective whatever time it is. So, and I have no idea. My clock, 12:25. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. I guess we'll see you all at the board meeting next. Thank you very much. Okay,
Paul, now that we're adjourned, just a quick question. I believe we did, I just haven't seen the calendar up invite updated. The board meeting next week was shifted by an hour, I think, if I remember.
I believe it's been shifted to 3 p.m. If you give me 1 second.
Yeah, I think we ended up saying 2:30. It hasn't, the calendar invite we had sent hasn't been updated. So I just wanted to flag that.
It is 2:30, yes.
Perfect, good. One other random question for you. It's not, do we, and maybe it's been talked about at a previous board meeting or anything like that. I love your presentations, great, but I also just want to ask, you know, have we gone through the conversation of, do we need presentations on every item? You know, similar to our council meetings, like I appreciate the information you shared on the policy as an example, but I don't think I actually needed a presentation today based off what I had read. I was happy to go right into questions. I just also don't want to be rude and you've taken the time to do it, but have we talked about that as a board about, you know, selections of items instead of requiring a presentation for everything?
So to my knowledge, the board has not had that discussion, but certainly we can include that as part of the strategic planning work that we're going to be engaging in. And I'll certainly stay conscious of potentially shortening up a kind of a very high level presentation on.
And lots of other people might want it. I just think I'm so used to my council business that if I've read the agenda, I know what's on the board, and I don't have any questions, and neither do other members, that we want to save you time too. You've got a lot of other things to be working on, and if we don't need presentations on everything, we should save you the effort as well. So, but yeah, strategic planning is the best time to talk about that. So,
thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
okay, gentlemen, we'll see you at the meeting then. Thanks very much.
Thank you.